So we've talked often about how life is hard, and we've mostly talked about how life is hard within the context of the three P's. The fact that life is not permanent, it's not perfect, and it's not personal. But I thought it might be interesting to dig a little deeper, and this is the material that came out in the email, which I have to admit had a stroke of incompetence about it, in that I had prepared it very diligently yesterday and meticulously. And then I thought that I would be skillful and sit with it for a little while before I actually sent it out, just double check it. And then I completely forgot it until Mary Jo reminded me this morning that I hadn't sent it out. So there we are, late arrival of an email. As I talk about each of these three different additional dimensions to how life is hard, you might think about it from a very personal perspective, how each of these dimensions shows up in your life. So one of the ways that life is hard is that there are certain things in life that are inevitable, as they say, death and taxes. But along with that, of course, is this phenomenon that we age, we tend to get sick, and of course we all end up dying, and that ends up happening to everybody we love. And as if that's not hard enough, there's enormous uncertainty about when and how, exactly how those things will happen. So this is sort of a double-barreled effect of making life hard. There's all these things that will absolutely certainly happen that we're not necessarily fans of, and we don't know how or when. Another aspect of life that makes it difficult is that while there is much that's knowable, much in the way of facts and evidence, we all discover fairly soon that even among all those things that are knowable, that we can't know all of them. And there's a certain discontent, frustration in that. And then beyond that, we discover that there are certain things about life that are simply unknowable. They lie within the category of mystery. We've talked about the nature of consciousness, how little we actually know about that. So it's this mix of things that are knowable. We feel as if we ought to know them, but we can't know everything. And then there's all that more that's unknowable. Another dimension in which life is hard is that there are these aspects of life that are tangible, that we take in a sensate way. And especially for those of us who are apparently about 70% of the population, there's a preference for taking things in this sensate, tangible way. And the alternative to that is the intangible, the world of concepts and ideas and spirituality. The differences between the tangible and the intangible can be pretty stark. And sometimes we really enjoy being grounded in the tangible, and then it wears us out. And sometimes we really prefer navigating in the world of ideas and concepts, but that can leave us feeling ungrounded. So these are just additional ways that life is hard, additional ways that we can look at life and see why we say it's hard, why we say it's so difficult. And then overlaying all of these different elements that I've just described is the underlying reality that almost all of this is beyond our control. Whether it's the arrival of a tropical storm, or the heat and humidity, or the breakdowns of household appliances that leave us frustrated, or having teenagers who make small mistakes that turn out to be a big deal. All of this, in any given moment, is beyond our control. And that can be pretty discouraging as well. So how do we cope with all of this? how do we try to navigate our lives? Well, of course, we focus first on surviving, on doing those things that are going to keep us above the threshold of the basics of survival. And then we go from there to thriving. And one of the ways that we do that is to establish a strong identity, this strong sense of self, persona, ego. And there's some pretty important benefits to doing that. In the process of establishing a strong sense of self, one of the things we do is to acquire skills, whether it's the skills for knowing how to get through school, or drive a car, or work a computer, or it's skills that have to do with relationships, skills that have to do with the bigger ideas in life. And as we acquire these skills, they give us a sense of confidence. And the more confidence we have, the more we're able to shift from just barely surviving to actually thriving. And somehow, over time, typically, this mix of skills and confidence begin to give us a sense of meaning, a sense of purpose in life, a sense of, oh, this is what my life is about. This is what I care about. This is what matters. So we have skills, confidence, meaning that are essential parts of our identity. And all of these characteristics of our identity arise from some mix of components. And the details on this are in the email, but I'll just list a few of them here. Some of the components that contribute to our sense of identity are our roots, where we grew up, the nature of the families that we grew up in, our education, what paths we followed with education, how much education we chose to get, the skills we've developed for a vocation, for an avocation, for hobbies, for additional interests in life, relationships, experiences, and how we've evolved over time to become more of ourselves. All of these contribute to our sense of identity. Another aspect of our lives that contributes to the specifics of our identities, of how each of these components shows up for each of us, are the four conditions of being human that are beyond our control. How we have evolved as a species over time, our genetic composition, our personal experiences, and social and cultural norms. So I'll mention each of these in a little bit more detail and think about them within the context of they're beyond our control and how each of these individual conditions has impacted these different components, such as our roots, our skills, our education, whatever. So I don't need to say too much more about how we've evolved as a species, but we do have our genetic composition. And we can think about some of our immediate ancestors, our parents, aunts, uncles, grandparents, and see how their characteristics were passed along genetically to us and how that shaped how we show up in the world, the kind of identity that we have. We can think back particularly to the experiences that we had when we were young. For instance, when Rob used to beat me up every other day, whether I needed it or not, and how that affected me, how that shaped my identity in life. We all have those experiences, and they make a big difference, whether it's on the skills that we've developed, our educational experiences, particularly on our relationships, how we interact with each other, and social and cultural norms. As I look at all of these different faces and think about each of you individually, I'm noting that in all likelihood we grew up in pretty different cultural and family circumstances. That although there were many norms that were in common, there were a lot of particulars that were very different. We had very different experiences. All of these things shape our identities. And so the issue around identity becomes whether we are having an identity or whether we have become that identity. Whether we fully believe the story that we have shaped about ourselves, or it's a way of navigating life. It's a device, a tool. Is it a device or a tool that we use to our advantage skillfully? Or is it a way of being that has taken over us, that is controlling us, that we're attached to? The more it's controlling us, the more we're attached to it, then the more vulnerable we are to taking life personally. We're more vulnerable we are to our fears and letting our fears magnify what people say to us, the events that happen. I mean, so Ike and Judith have just had this experience where the day that they were planning to leave Sarasota, Florida, to go to the Northeast was the day that Elsa showed up, the tropical storm. And now they're in New Hampshire, and Elsa's still there with them. I mean, it would be easy to get into this place of thinking, what's the matter with Elsa? Why is she following me all the way up the East Coast? We all have these funny things. It can be like that. I'm not suggesting they're thinking that way. Obviously, they're not. But we can see how we all get caught in those traps. So let's do a little practice around this. So again, beginning by taking a couple of deep breaths with long, slow out breaths, allowing whatever extra tension or energy is present after all this cognitive processing to just slide away. Let it flow out on the out breath. And settling into the surface we're sitting on. Just settling in and softening a bit. And taking a moment now and recalling an especially distinctive characteristic of yours. For instance, one such characteristic might be how you show up with friends, or how you show up at work. Choosing one of those and thinking about the details of how you show up. What thoughts and spoken words and actions characterize how you interact with friends or how you interact at work. And think about how this distinctive quality of yours has been of benefit to you? And how it has left you vulnerable? In either case, simply recognizing how much this characteristic is part of your identity, is part of the story that you have about yourself. Simply recognizing the reality of it. Allowing for this reality. After all, it's already happened. Perhaps even accepting the reality of it. And in this allowing and accepting, noticing what thoughts are arising. Any emotions that are arising. And what physical sensations, what bodily sensations are present. And after a few moments of concentrating on the physical sensation, perhaps you're feeling a little spaciousness where you might investigate. Inquiring of yourself, how has your gene pool contributed to this characteristic? What role did your youthful experiences play? What role have social and cultural norms played in the shaping of this characteristic? And taking a moment to offer yourself a little kindness, perhaps even forgiveness, for this characteristic and for being present with this investigation.